And so we are excited to have former Mayor Sheila Dixon with us to share her story and talk about being an educator. Please welcome her to the stage.
How y'all doing? Well, he had one song on, a rap song, and I'm old school. So I don't know what that was, but it was good. I told him, go old school. I should have told him what year old school. But let me say this to the young lady who came up, who was 92 years old, who taught for 40-some years. One of the things that I've learned about teachers, when people stay in the teaching area, profession, it seems like you stay young. Because I run into some of my teachers today who I had in elementary school and junior high, because we didn't have middle school, and in high school, and they still look the same. So let me tell you, if you want to get out of it, stay in it, if you want to keep that youthful look. So all of my stories are connected. So let me just back up a second. I went to school 87 before the other Sheila, and during that time, schools weren't integrated. And I had an old white teacher when I was at 87. And this particular teacher used to tell the black students that you would end up to be nothing. And it was at that point when I decided that I was going to become a teacher. And so whatever it took, I knew I was going to become a teacher. I was a middle child. I had an older sister, older brother, and a younger brother. So I went to Towson State University because they gave me money. I had to go where they gave me money. And they also had a very good early childhood program, early childhood and child psychology. But I partied out at Morgan during that time because it wasn't much partying you could do at Towson because it was very few of us at Towson. So when I had my student teaching experience, I was at Stewart Hill Elementary School. I don't know if they still call it Stewart Hill. It's right by Union Square in southwest Baltimore. They used to call it Pigtown. It was a mixture of very poor African-American, white, mix. It was interesting, and it was open space. So my student experience, I worked with kindergarten and pre-kindergarten. We had 3 kindergarten teachers on one side and 3 pre-kindergarten on the other side. And during that student teaching experience, I have to say that those teachers were phenomenal in helping to guide me and to teach me and to really give me the kind of information I needed. So when I graduated from Towson, Baltimore City Public Schools, there was a waiting list. Now, I don't think that's the case today, is it? Well, it was a waiting list back then. Some of y'all weren't born. Most of y'all probably weren't born. It was a waiting list. So I was 23 years old, 22, 23, 5'3½", 100 pounds. I wore afro, and I looked not my age, but younger. So I ended up teaching in an alternative ed program. And within that alternative ed, it was called Baltimore Prep. And actually, to this day, we need a school like a Baltimore Prep where children, it was young people who couldn't make it in the regular school system. It was the worst of the worst young people. Now, keep in mind, I lived uptown, grew up in Ashburton, sat on the steps, really wasn't engaged except for my little community, not like my brother who was a year older than me. I wasn't like out there. I was shy, but at that time, I started taking karate. And I met this young man at a nightclub called Odell's and Gatsby's. Y'all know about that. So the summer I graduated, when a lot of my friends went away to school, I made the decision to stay home because at that time my parents had divorced and I felt that I needed to be connected home and close to my mother. So Gatsby's, Odell's, I met this young man who was several years older than me, and he was a karate instructor. And in order to really get involved with him, you had to learn karate. Now, I was very active in school back in the day with modern dance and all kinds of other activities. Never in my mind would I ever thought I would get involved in karate, but it ended up benefiting me long term. So, make a long story short, So at that point, I had been involved in karate probably about 10, 15 years at that point. I had gone up to my brown belt and it was getting my black belt, my first degree black belt. So here I am, Westside Skills Center. If you know Westside Skills Center on Frederick Road, that shopping center, well, there was the mayor's office of employment development was in the front of the building where I taught, and we were in the back. And here you had all of these hard-headed young people who couldn't make it in the regular school system, and they saw me as one of the teachers. So, of course, they said, oh, we can take advantage of her. So what I did was, because they also worked, we found jobs for them, so they were in class. They had very intense psychological group sessions to really deal with issues that were not allowing them to achieve their ability, because some of them were bitter. I mean, same issues that kids have today, but they had very intense therapy along with teaching. And I was a classroom teacher, and we also participated in the intense therapy because it also benefited us. But of course, the young people in my class who were probably between the ages of 17, 18 years old, they knew how old I was. They saw how timid I looked. So one day, I wore my karate outfit in to school, and I said to them, I said, okay, I know y'all think I'm timid and that I can't handle myself. I said, all right, which one of y'all want to come up here and challenge me right now? Now, mind you, you're not supposed to fight in school. Not supposed to. So one of the young ladies came up and challenged me, and I ended up doing a backspin kick, knocking her over, and at that point in time, after that, the rest of the class began to respect me, and they were doing everything that I asked them to do in the class. Now, hold that right there. So this was a really good program, though, because some of those young people that were in the program years later still had some of the same jobs that they had when they were doing internships when they worked for us. But hold that right there. So now, Baltimore City Public Schools opened up. Oh, I was able to go and teach in my field, early childhood. So I had kindergarten. Now, I love teaching. I love working with the kids. I was really good with assessing a child to determine how they learn. Every child does not learn the same way, and you really have to take the time to work with them. Some of them phonetically, some of them by sight, but every child learns differently. So here I am, young teacher. I had braids in my hair, 5'3½". You know, I got heels on today. 5'3½", still looked, and they were like, how old are you? How can you be teaching these children? You look like you are their age. So the parents came in, and it's interesting, though, because the parents had said to me, if my child gets off, and this is kindergarten, if they don't respect you and they don't listen, oh, you have my permission to spank them. Now, mind you, you're not supposed to spank. And then there are other parents that came in. Now, keep in mind, this is Southwest Baltimore, Pigtown. You had black, white, and mixed. Very poor individuals. Then you had other parents that come in. You put your hands on my child. You know, very professional. Oh, I would never put my hands on your children. So aside from karate, I used to do meditation. So I would put the kids in a circle, and I would begin to teach them how to meditate. And so even in the kindergarten, you have kids that don't want to listen. So the kids that parents said that I could spank them, no issue at all. The kids that said, don't you put your hand on them, you had your challenges. So a couple times, I stepped on a mini toe by mistake. But what I did was, I said, okay, let me stop stepping on the toes to get them straight. What I did was I brought in my karate outfit. I said, now, I wasn't going to challenge them. I was just going to show them what I could do. The fact that I could break bricks, and I could break wood, and that I could do X, Y, and Z. And when I showed them what I could do, I had no issues from then on with the kids that gave me the challenge. So, back, Baltimore Prep. What I found was that in teaching during that time in Baltimore City Public Schools, if you weren't connected with a particular sorority or particular organization. Now, mind you, I went to Towson State, predominantly white. I was part of the Black Student Union and all of that. And at that time, I was really involved in my karate. I was working 2 part-time jobs because I had to pay tuition along with the Pell Grant, you know, the loans, etc. And so I really didn't have time to be involved in joining a sorority or fraternity. But when I came to Baltimore City Public Schools, at that time, I believe it was Alice Penderhughes was the superintendent. And if you weren't connected, because what I felt was that I wanted to move up in the system. And I loved teaching, but I also realized that in order to make changes policy-wise, I had to move up in the system. But I wasn't connected. I've always been an independent person, but I will work with groups of people. I had this one student, Christina, who was mixed. And I could tell that she could read very well, and she could read like on a 2nd or 3rd grade level. And I went to the principal and I went to my supervisor and I said, I think that Christina should go and skip a grade so that she could work on her academic skills. I knew she needed the socialization piece of it being in the kindergarten. So of course the principal and the supervisor said, no, we couldn't do that. So what I did was during reading time in the classroom, I would sneak her upstairs to the 1st grade teachers so that she could practice and work with them and then come back into our class. And I did this for that whole year, and I could see she was expanding. But I was frustrated because I felt that here this child, and I had to literally sneak her into the classroom. It's not like that today. I know y'all have more freedom than we had back then. Because keep in mind, we wanted 10 months paid salary teachers. I think y'all had 12 months now. No? Oh, I heard y'all had 12 months. We had 10 months, so we always had to have a summer job, etc. So, to make a long story short, what I have learned, and going back to Baltimore Prep, the young lady that I had to get straight, 25, 30 years later, she's a member of Bethel AME Church, which I'm a member of. She's also a part of my stewardess board. The one thing she didn't do back then when we kept saying about getting her GED, you know, she went on with her life, she had a family, she's now a grandparent, was to get her GED. So we reconnected, and she changed drastically, but one of the things that I noticed is that she still didn't get a GED. And so what I'm doing now is encouraging her to go back, and she's in school to get her GED. Because now that her kids are grown and she has grandkids, but to make that connection years later, after teaching her and knocking her on the ground, because she was a hard-headed young lady, and now we've reconnected and we're really close friends. She just went through chemotherapy, and I was there with her. I took her to University of Maryland, but to have that connection and reconnect. But the point of my story is that each child, when we teach, is different. And we have to keep that in mind and not lump kids as being the same, because they're not. And so over the years, because I wasn't joining a sorority so that I could move up in the school system at that time under Alice Penderhughes, that's when I decided I wanted to get involved in politics and make changes policy-wise. But at that point, that's when the school system, because of not having the financial support that we needed from the city, the schools were then taken over by the state, and the school system was different. Baltimore City wasn't controlling the schools anymore. When I was on the council, we lost that because the state had to put money in. And so, to make a long story short, the relationship that I had, it went south, but the karate benefited me a great deal, particularly in the classroom with my kids, because I made sure that they knew that even though I was 5'3", weighing 100 pounds, I was not going to let them step over me, but they respected me for that, and even the parents too. And secondly, that each child is an individual, and that we have to respect them and who they are so that we can help to develop who they are. And even though Aloma now is maybe in her 40s or going 50 maybe right now, the fact that I was able to convince her to go back for her GED after all those years so that she could then help for herself to grow for herself and her family. So I'm going to close with this. One of the things that I do when I am talking to at graduation or talking with teachers or principals or anybody in education, I say three things. One thing, teachers are underpaid. And I always compare them to basketball players. And I have a nephew who's a basketball player, who was a basketball player. And we used to work with him and his brother. One is a police officer, Juan, who was a basketball player. But teachers should be paid because we help to mold individuals' lives. You know, aside from their families, they're with you half of their day. And so teachers need to be paid more. Teachers need to be respected and get the support that they need, and that teachers need to be appreciated. You know, one of the things that I find, and I had an opportunity, because I ended up, when I realized I couldn't move up, I actually changed careers altogether. I went into the international arena. And there's two places that I visit when I go overseas, and Africa was my territory, and I had some of the Caribbean islands. I would visit a prison, and I would visit a school. And you can go on a school in Ghana and places where I went where there's one classroom with multiple grades in the classroom. And when those kids come here to the U.S., how they exceed our young people, because education for them is a priority. And that's what we have to get back in, making education a priority. And so that will always be with me. My staff that I've had over the years, when I was in politics, knew that I was a teacher because of how I dealt with them as well as how they dealt with me. I knew that each one of those staff persons had a certain skill, a skill set, and they knew that. And a couple of times I had to take out the black belt, you know, because, you know, you just got to do it from time to time. But the point of, and I never really was violent, but I did threaten. And I feel for y'all today, because if I was in the classroom today, I don't know what would happen to me. But I want to first just commend you for what you're doing and to continue the great work. Now, my last story, Northwestern High School is where I went. One of the best high schools in this city for many, many years. Well, as you know, Northwestern closed. The alumni tried to come up with a new plan. And we work with, I think, 5 CEOs in the school system in order to keep the school open. We came up with an international school concept. But of course, politics played in and it closed. So I had an opportunity to work to do the last graduation. And when I did the last graduation at Northwestern, it was really loud, and the kids and the parents was like, I said, I'm not used to this. I mean, it was just so disrespectful. They say, please don't get out of your seats or clap until after all the kids are called, and they don't listen, and they're coming up. I left it with a headache. Well, when I left the school, I was leaving the campus. I saw one young man, and he had a shirt and tie on. And I went over to him because he had a shirt and tie on, and I said, congratulations. I said, you look really nice. I said, so what are your plans? He said, looked at me dumbfounded. I don't have any plans. I said, how you graduate from high school with no plans? I said, well, what do you like to do? He says, I like construction. I said, this is your lucky day, because I work with contractors. One of my clients is the Maryland Minority Contractors Association, so I work with contractors. I said, give me your resume, and I can't guarantee you anything, but I will share your resume with one of the companies. He says, I don't have a resume. I said, how do you graduate with no plan, no resume? He went back to school the next day. And mind you, this young man grew up in Park Heights. He lives in Park Heights. His father's raising him. His mother's on drugs. But he took the initiative, went to school the next day, and he wasn't a bright young man. You know, he had some learning challenges. But he went back. His teacher helped him with the resume. He sent me the resume. I said, I'll send it out. One of our contractors contacted him, interviewed him, and said, I will give you an internship, but you have to go through Jumpstart. This is a program, it's a pre-apprenticeship program. He went through Jumpstart. He invited me to his graduation. I went to the graduation. It was at Our Daily Bread. The first new school that was built, I think it was Fort Worthington that was rebuilt. He was working with the contractors at Fort Worthington, making $21 an hour. So he calls me to keep me apprised on what he's doing. But keep in mind, if he didn't have that shirt and tie on, I don't think I would have stopped because I had a headache when I left that school. So, but my point is that, you know, you never know who you connect with and the difference that you can make in a young person's life and what you say to them or how you respond to them. But it's all about love. So I just want to commend all of you for what you do. Continue to do the great work. You see this young lady over here who's 94 years old, looking younger than that. Education, teaching, keeps you young. Thank you.